Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, you name it, all across the world spectrum of crypto, blockchain, and everything related to it. Today, I have an amazing guest. I'm really looking forward to this interview. I have the founder of Scry Analytics, Colatio, Alok Aggarwal. Alok, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Thank you for joining me today. And let's kick things off. And I ask you first, what is your background? And is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I did my Ph.D. in machine learning AI algorithms in 1984 from Johns Hopkins. Then I worked for IBM Watson Research Center, which is about 40 miles north of New York City, for 16 years, 1984 to 2000. Wrote a lot of research papers in this area, theory of computer vision, essentially. Taught at MIT for a year. Then in 1993, we were very lucky. We got a CEO from a paper mill up from Maine, near Portland, Maine. He wanted us to improve the paper mill. So we had no clue about how paper was made. We went there for 3 months, understood how paper was made. And there was no open source. And so we wrote our own algorithms in AI. AI has been around since 1950. So we wrote our own algorithms and we improved the paper mill by 1.5% effectively in total operating costs. So as you know, paper is a commodity. So 1.5% was a fair amount of money. And they ran the entire solution for 24 years. So IBM Research does all the inventions, but cannot manage them because that's not its charter. So these guys, Madison Paper Mill itself managed it for 24 years. This was 1993-94 period. Then I became the director of strategy for IBM Research and started their IBM India Research Lab during 1998 and 2000, grew it to 30 PhDs, 30 masters. Then I quit to start a previous company which had nothing to do with AI or analytics. It's called EvalueServe, which provides research and analytics people, chartered accountants, CPAs, certified public accountants, MBAs, etc., to consulting firms, MBAs, and so on. I still own quite a few shares in there. It is still running. It's 4,500 people worldwide and about 18 centers worldwide. So, but I wanted to go back to my roots. So in 2014, I started Scry Analytics, Inc. And analytics abbreviation is A, Inc. is I. So it became Scry AI with a pun on AI. The word Scry, interestingly, is an English word. You can use it in Scrabble, convert try to Scry. It means crystal ball gazing or fortune telling. So Nostradamus is considered the biggest scryer because he wrote all these things about prophecies about the future. And since we are doing predictive analytics about whether people will pay back their mortgage loans, whether SMBs will pay back their loans, whether suppliers will be able to supply or there is a problem in a supply chain, or whether a railroad car, the wheels of a railroad car are going to go bust and therefore the railroad car will be stuck on the tracks for some time. Since we're doing a lot of predictive analytics, hence we're predicting the future, hence the name Scry.
Very interesting. I didn't know you could use it in Scrabble, but I'm going to.
All right. You can always surprise your wife or your partners or your competitors in Scrabble with that.
Yeah. So I want to dig into more about what Scry AI is all about and Colatio. What are they all about? What do you do well?
Yeah, so we are essentially based on a research model. We are an R&D company, and as part of R&D, we'll work with clients, and then we'll figure out which are the good products to build in AI. I mean, so therefore, we're less of a services company, although we do R&D services, more of a product company. We have 4 products. One of the key products is Colatio, a Latin word for the same as collation or putting together. And the whole idea is you take any format of data, let's say it's a scanned document, PDF, Excel spreadsheet, XBRL, and so on. You figure out what it is. It'll convert it into an electronic format. The problem with electronic format in most of these cases, which is often OCR, but what is the problem is that it has to reconstruct tables. It has to pull out the information from graphs and charts. So that is something, the second, what we call the second mile or the second module, our Colatio does. The third is it figures out if there is a table in there, let's say income statement, or it's a W-2 statement, it figures out the formulas that are in there. And it automatically figures out using AI the formulas that are in there. And it uses those formulas to actually reconcile the statement. So if it knows that A plus B plus C should equal D, because that's what the accountant has written, it will figure that out just like humans do. Just like your formulas in Excel spreadsheet, it actually, even though PDF document is not an Excel spreadsheet, it figures out the formulas and then reconciles it. And because it's able to reconcile, then the human doesn't have to reconcile. Then it can say, look, this is straight through processing. You can take it further. You don't need to touch it. But here I'm not able to reconcile. So you may need to, as a human, you may need to review it. So that's the fundamental difference what we are doing. It's an intelligent document processing and reconciliation factory. We consider about 160 different types of documents, which are, a lot of them are tax forms, but we can literally handle any document at this time.
You mentioned second mile. I've had a lot of conversations about last mile, but you also solved the first mile problem, right?
Yeah.
What is the first mile problem? Then what's the second mile problem, and so forth? You don't have to go to 100 or less, but
No. So the first mile problem. So if you look at LLMs, or GPTs, which are right now the rage, right? I mean, with Chat GPT and so on, everyone is talking about it. Now, if you look at LLMs, they've been trained on anywhere from 400 million to 800 million pages of data. But most of this data is textual in nature. So it is very good in understanding text. It's very good in summarizing it. It's very good in answering if the question is a textual question and it has an answer. But the first mile problem is it's not that good if your data is, let's say, a PowerPoint presentation or a chart or a graph or a table. So that's the first mile problem that we are solving with Colatio. The second mile problem is that humans have a context that they create, that this thing is related to that. So effectively, you create basically expert systems in your mind that these things are related and so on and so forth. So that's the second mile problem that most of these LLMs have to understand if they have to solve real life problems, not just writing a poem or summarizing or answering a question, when was Abraham Lincoln born, but answering more questions which are deeper questions about, let's say, about a quarterly report, financial report. So that's the second mile problem, is the context. The third mile problem is, even as humans, individuals, we give prompts to these LLMs. What are prompts? They're basically hints. I'm asking you a question, by the way, here is a hint. This is how I would like you to answer along these lines. Now, if you're answering automatic questions, you can't give hints all the time about the particular quarterly report or an earnings presentation or a manual, which is oil and gas rig manual, because you don't even know that. So you need to figure out an automated way of creating these prompts, or what we call hints, that can be given to the LLM. Because that is how it will figure out, because it doesn't have, even though it has been trained on 400 million to 800 million pages, it is not trained on everything. It is not trained on that manual about rigs. So therefore, it needs that information, and then it can use its general information that it is trained on to give a good answer. So that's the third mile problem. So those are the things that we are trying to solve with our three products that we have. Basically Colatio, Datatio, and Vigilo. Vigilo means vigil. Datatio is data flow mapping. How is data flowing, and so on and so forth. So that's the fun part.
It sounds fun. I have a follow-up. A couple of years ago, was it 2 years ago and a year ago, you had all these bank implosions, in Silicon Valley, right? Yeah. Silvergate and some others, right?
Silicon Valley Bank, then First Republic wasn't really, it didn't implode. It could have imploded, may not have imploded, but JP Morgan Chase bought, yeah.
Yeah. So before I got into crypto, one of the things I did for a number of years was CCAR, stress testing. And, we had all these accounting methodologies and all this different stuff, right? How could your products or AI in general, what you're doing with his financial statements, have helped these banks who didn't have CEOs with backgrounds in CCAR, help them to maybe stay in business had they been able to use your platform to do the financials and the stress testing? Would it have helped?
Those are very hard problems because these are one in a 20-year or one in a 40-year events, right? So the reason why Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic Bank went under was because they had given out many loans at a very, very low interest rate. 2.5%, 3%, and thereabouts, right? And they were doing extremely well. Unfortunately, the interest rates went up very, very quickly to 6.5% and so on. So the problem with pretty much all AI, even humans, we learn from the past, which is we are learning the probability distribution, what has really happened in the past. So whether it's us humans or it is AI, it's very hard to predict sudden changes which are literally catastrophic in nature. And that is what happened within 5 or 6 months. Now, Goldman Sachs was doing the same thing, but Goldman Sachs is a much bigger and much broader bank than Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic Bank. They did not have their base as widely spread out as Goldman Sachs or some of the other banks. It's not only these two banks who are giving these loans at such low interest rates, quite a few banks, but more were more spread. And I think those are always very hard to figure out because they're so intertwined, the rates. It doesn't affect only one aspect of your bank. It affects many aspects. And then you have a deck of cards which begins to, house of cards which begins to fall down. So I'm not so sure whether it could have predicted, using CCAR or other models, whether AI could have helped. It's the same thing that it is probably very hard to figure out, to predict extreme changes in stock market, for example, using AI. Now, stock market could easily fall by 20%. Everyone has their own theories, whether it will go up by another 15% or fall by 15%, but very little probability distribution of the past, which either tells humans how to think or tells AI systems how to. And we always have to first think, can humans solve the problem before we go into, can AI solve the problem? Because after all, we are training the AI systems like we train our children.
That is true. So I want to get into it then. What is the ideal, AI? You mentioned ChatGPT, and a lot of people I talk to who were using that in their job saying, "Oh yeah, my job is all about AI," and I'm like, AI is more machine learning and federated learning and all that stuff. So what's the best model?
There is no best model. I think it's like humans, right? You want to say there is a doctor, there is an engineer. You want to say what is the best human? I don't think there is a best human. There is a human for a particular job. So you have to tell me what is your problem statement or use case, and then you have the best model. For example, deep learning networks, GPTs, all fall apart when you come to banks. When most use cases in banks, not all use cases, but most use cases in banks, these things will fall apart. Suppose the problem statement was, let's find more fraud, create an AI system to find more fraud in ACH debit transactions. When people are automatically taking money out of my bank account or of my company bank account, etc., right? That's a fraud. Now, you try to use ChatGPT or any of the LLMs, they will fall apart. You try to, in fact, use any deep learning networks, they will fall apart because you just don't have that much data to feed in. You don't have 400 million pages. Forget about 400 million. You don't even have 4 million bad fraudulent transactions, because if there were 4 million bad fraudulent transactions, the bank would have gone bankrupt probably by now. So it all depends as to what the problem statement is, because in some cases, these things will work well. In some cases, some other algorithms will work well. And there are about 120 different kind of AI machine learning algorithms that exist today. And that's why it's called data science, because you have to experiment basically which algorithm would work well on a particular problem.
Interesting. So you mentioned, I want to go back to what you talked about at the beginning briefly. You helped build out the AI Watson, right? So
yeah, we had some algorithms which we later on used in more.
So I started using AI Watson in 2017, and I stopped a couple years later, right? People think that was an advancement, but now we have come so far. So you said also that AI has been around for 100 years, or since 1930s, and you wrote a book.
1950s, yeah. It'll be 100 in 2050. The first article or research paper on AI came in 1950.
Great. So you wrote a book called Fourth Industrial Revolution and 100 Years of AI. So why is that book now more important than ever to read, and what takeaways will people get from reading it?
Yeah, so many things. So first chapter, in my view, is the most important one, because I'm setting up a framework that what are industrial revolutions, first of all. I mean, we say we are in the fourth industrial revolution. Why it's not the fifth? Why it's not the third? Why it's not the seventh? And I give 8 characteristics of industrial revolutions that we are currently seeing in the fourth one also, that have been in the past. One characteristic, for example, is that every revolution, industrial revolution, has many inventions, not one or two, but many inventions that happen. Right now, we have gene editing, we have blockchain, you were talking about crypto, you have blockchain, you have Internet of Things, you have, of course, AI, you have data, lot of data which has its own inventions, you have robotics and so on. And in the past, previous invention, second industrial revolutions, you had motors, you had automobiles and so on and so forth. We can go on and on. So there are a lot of inventions. The second one is that one of the inventions actually creates an infrastructure for the society. For example, in the first one, the infrastructure was water and steam works. So you had water canals which were created by the British, and steam was created automatically. I mean, not automatically, but using coal and so on, because it was going to be used in steam engines or in textiles. So the second revolution had electricity as the infrastructure. Edison created first electric plant. The third one had broadband and wireless, basically electronic communication as the infrastructure. Now we will have data as the infrastructure, because without data there is no AI. So you need data as an infrastructure. So second point that I'm trying to make is that we have to look at data as something which is going to be very important from an infrastructure perspective. The third characteristic is that every industrial revolution had one invention which became pervasive. In the first one, it was the steam engines. Steam engines began to be used in boats, in locomotives or trains, in textiles, and so on. In the second one, it was electric motor. In fact, there were two things which became pervasive. Automobiles and electric motors became pervasive. Electric motors, there are 3,500 different types of electric motors today. Probably you and I, wherever we are sitting, we have a few electric motors running, we don't even know that they're running. The third one had CPUs, or small central processing units, which are in our smartphones, which are in refrigerators, washing machines today, and so on. In the fourth one, it will be AI systems, which will be similarly pervasive and ubiquitous. On the website, we are putting 1,080 use cases where AI is being used already. And it's not all GPTs. In fact, GPTs and LLMs is only 5% of what we are showing there. Most of it is actually different kind of machine learning systems, support vector machines, and regression analysis, and so on and so forth. So I give 5 other characteristics without going into detail, but it's important to understand that what has happened in the past. So 1955 to 1973, there was a massive hype in AI, which fell apart. The hype was so massive that even Hollywood got interested and 2001 Space Odyssey came out, where HAL 9000 is a computer, which is like artificial general intelligence computer. And if people haven't seen that movie, they are recommended to see it, because today's hype is always reminiscent to me of the hype of 1956 to 1973. That wasn't the only hype that happened in AI. 1980 to 1987, 89, there was a second hype about AI in expert systems, where people thought that they could just take knowledge and they could make AI really good. And that also fell apart. I'm not saying that this hype will totally fall apart, but the hype is so huge that it is bound to go down, because things take time to gradually seep in the society. And that is the fourth interesting characteristic of every industrial revolution. Railways got hyped up in 1830 to 1840. People invested so much in railways. Most railways went bankrupt by 1890s. Similarly, we saw dot-com boom, telecom boom. There was so much hype and it went bankrupt. We saw it very recently with driverless cars, $100 billion were put in, and most of the driverless truck companies have gone bankrupt. So all I'm saying is things take time. This will also take time. And that's why it is to 2050 I go, because by 2050, the hype would have gone down and really things would have begun to seep into the society.
Interesting. Very interesting. Why do you think the hype cycle over the next 25 years is going to go down, like, as opposed to where we were in the last three hype cycles? What's different about this cycle?
So there are differences. And I mean, Mark Twain had a very interesting quote: history never repeats itself, but it rhymes. And I think that's very true about this versus the past. That there are things which are similar and there are things which are different. So what is similar is the people are all excited about, hey, what can GPTs do? What can AI do? And so on and so forth. Another thing is, which has been the case even in the past, is any sufficiently advanced technology is considered magic by humans. It was one of the laws that Arthur C. Clarke, one of the sci-fi writers, wrote in 1952. Yeah. And AI is considered right now, it's the magical thing. I mean, if you ask somebody, they'll say, yeah, AI can do it. Well, even humans can't do it. Can you please just tell me how you expect AI to do it? Or AI will beat humans in 10 years. They've been saying this for the last 30 years. AI will beat humans in next 10 years. So this is a typical thing where things are similar. Similarly, in the third industrial revolution, we were already in 1980s thinking about job losses. In the first industrial revolution, there was Luddite movement when textile machines came out, mainly run by steam engines and so on. They were worried about job losses. We have similar things which are very common amongst all of them. The place where it is different is, one, capital has become much cheaper because the world has become richer. So the amount of capital you require, for example, to make data infrastructure really, really robust is quite a lot. But then the world has also become richer, so it can afford to put in that kind of a capital. Secondly, earlier revolutions took place either in Britain or in US, but most of the countries or many of the countries did not participate. Now, because of electronic communication, every country is going to participate, more or less. Out of 192 countries, our analysis show at least 140 countries will participate in this industrial revolution. So there will be a lot of give and take, and there is no guarantee that the best algorithm will come out of France or out of India or out of Ethiopia or out of US, because all countries are participating. The third dissimilarity or somewhat of a difference is, yes, it has taken time for inventions to seep into the society, but the time has been going down because of communication, because of various things. For example, it took 60 years for railroads to seep into the society. Thomas Edison created the first electric generation system in 1882. Half of the Americans got electricity only in 1925. So it took 40 years, 44 years for half of the Americans to get electricity to their homes. In the third one, 1971 is when the first wireless phone was invented in Motorola by Cooper. And it took on 1990s, late 1990s, when phones, half of the American public had mobile phones. So it took 25 years. So now you can see that particular trend going down. And next one could be easily 10 to 15 years before things seep into the society, especially combined with the fact that you have more communication and more capital around.
Really interesting. And so the time to market is going down by like half each time.
Yeah, half or at least to two-thirds, if not half, to two-thirds of the original time.
Great. So you and I have a conversation again in 2050.
If I live by then.
Me too. What's the world like?
I think the world will be an interesting world. So I discussed that in chapter 16 as part of job losses and jobs gain. So I'm not, first of all, worried about job losses because they're not happening tomorrow. I don't think too many jobs will be lost because of AI even in the next 10 years, because it will take 10 years for AI to seep into the society. Right now, it's at the fringes where it is helping humans. We're trying to figure out where does it help, where does it not help. It's very expensive, which people don't realize. The return on investment is very high. I mean, people say, I can do this with AI. Yeah, I can do it with humans sitting in Philippines or India, much cheaper than with your AI. So people don't realize that part. I mean, people don't realize how much expensive is even hardware to run some of these algorithms. So that is something which will figure out in 10 years. In 25 years, it will begin to replace jobs. We believe that in 25 years, about 400 million jobs around the world will be replaced, which is a lot. I mean, just to give you an idea, the total number of jobs in the US is around 160 to 165 million. So we're talking about 2.5 times the number of jobs in US that will be replaced by AI and robotics. The good news is the following. Unfortunately or fortunately, the number of people that are being born, what is called the total fertility rate, the number of kids that women are having, children that women are having around the world is falling. If the total fertility rate goes down below 2.1, that is, a woman will have at most 2.1 children on an average in her lifetime, then over time, the society's total population will go down. We've already seen that in Japan. We are already seeing that in Italy, now in China. By 2050, 55 countries will have decreasing population. The population which is not decreasing will be aging very quickly. So therefore, somebody will have to do the jobs. So we may be begging AI and robotics to help us out to do the jobs. Otherwise, who will do all the jobs that we have in 2050?
Interesting. So we're going to depopulate to catch up to technology.
I think we have no choice. I think you just don't have enough people. I mean, I tried to make that argument in chapter 16, jobs losses and jobs gain, that the number of people who will be of employable age and will be working would have fallen considerably at a percentage level.
I'm just wondering what blockchain's role is going to be in this, if it's going to be just a fad or if it's going to go up in usage along with AI.
Yes, I think blockchain would be used. I mean, crypto is part of blockchain, but I think blockchain in general has many uses, right? Because in a given set of people or a group of people or constituents, it can create basically amongst them, they can create something which nobody else can touch because as blockchain goes, it is completely secure. You can't change it. It's immutable. So that has many advantages. I mean, one chapter is on blockchain and AI, and I give an example of counterfeit drugs that it will be very hard to do if you really deploy blockchain and AI properly, it'll be very hard to have counterfeit drugs, because the company which is producing will put a block there. It goes to the manufacturer. The manufacturer will put his own stamp and timestamp, and again encrypt it and put a block which only the manufacturer and the next person set of people know. You cannot change. It's immutable. I mean, even if somebody finds out, reverse engineers it, the timestamp would have changed, and therefore you will not be able to change it. So that way, blockchain has many advantages along with AI. One of the disadvantages is fundamentally, if in a blockchain software, if you have made a mistake, it's a very hard thing to fix the mistake. That's one of the biggest challenges blockchain faces, actually.
I agree. I agree. And then, bringing blockchain, there are mining companies now in Bitcoin and Litecoin miners that are using these new chips. And
Yeah.
these, right now they're used for mining, but downstream they're used for AI,
Yeah.
right? So we're going to continue. Hopefully, we'll continue, right, the evolution of chips, and how is that going to impact everything?
Yeah, so that will be the most interesting, in my view. That will be one of the most interesting things. What does the future of computing look like? Because if we continue to do where we are going, there is a paper in IEEE Spectrum which says that 30% of world's electricity will be used by data centers who are working on AI, telecom, and so on. 30% of world's electricity by 2030. I mean, that's a huge amount of electricity usage, fossil fuel burning, and so on and so forth. Now, first of all, it's not clear that we can get the return on investment on that kind of computational infrastructure for the society, for human society. The second thing it's not clear is whether we should not have very, very well-defined special purpose chips to do special purpose things. I mean, video camera could have its own small chip for training video cameras to check whether there are humans in the middle of the road or not. And that's about it. I think that itself will change quite a bit, because one, electricity usage is going through the roof. Second, the cost of hardware is a lot. The cost of, I do not know how many people have realized, companies have realized that the cost of hyperscalers, namely AWS and Azure and Google Cloud, is enormous as you begin to scale up. And very soon it will begin to hit as a separate item within the IT departments of companies if they haven't already hit there.
I agree. I agree.
And that's why I keep saying that, look, people don't realize if they do a total return on investment, sometimes you say, oh my God, it's cheaper to just use a human sitting in a low-wage country than use AI.
It's interesting times we live in. So,
Yep.
I want to thank you very much. I really enjoyed speaking with you today. I want to thank you very much for your time. I have one last question.
Sure.
And I'm going to make a recommendation. People should buy your book and read it. I'm going to.
Yeah.
How can people find out more information about you, about Scry AI, Scry Analytics, Glacial, your products? Get a copy of your book. How can they do any of that?
So the book is available on Amazon.com. They can buy it in a paper format. They can buy in Kindle. I think it's $6. It's going to come out in Audible for a couple of dollars. They can use it as Audible. They just go to Amazon and type in my name, Alok Aggarwal AI, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It will be in the top 1 or 2 books of that kind. So that's really straightforward. To learn more about us, scryai.com. Very simple. SCRYAI, 6 letters, scryai.com. And you go on our website, you can find us on LinkedIn. And similarly, you can find me on LinkedIn and so on.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.